The universe doesn't send messages.
How do you know?
It's not sentient. It doesn't give a damn about you and me. It's just a collection of random particles careening through a void.
The title of the third episode of For All Mankind's fourth season is Bear Hug, and as good episode titles usually do, it has more than one meaning. What strikes me about this is that both of the situations it's referring to are pretty similar. We have what Margo finds herself caught up in, and what Kelly and Aleida willingly invite into their lives. And both situations are fluid. So much so that I wasn't 100% sure what was happening in the Soviet Union, and I think the looks on Kelly and Aleida's faces at the end of their part of the story indicate that they're not sure about what they helped set off either. Ed finally gets to be the first at something, and that comes with a mention of Wayne, which is always welcome. And then we also get some Bill in a situation where he gets Aleida to open up and mentions peeing his pants. There's a lot, and I was pleased that they opened up right where we left off with Margo, so let's start there. When we last saw her, she was being detained, and we found out right away that the police who picked her up answer to a man named Korzhenko. Her friend from the newsstand tells her they're making examples out of people who ask questions, and he tells her to do whatever they say. If you've really been paying attention, you'll recognize the character Korzhenko from the episode 1 opening montage, or the short about the Soviet economic boom in 2001. If not, there's a news report about the current situation that tells us he's the face of the coup. He's a Politburo member opposed to Gorbachev's liberal reforms with the stated goal of returning the Soviet Union to Marxist-Leninist principles. Tanks are currently surrounding the Russian parliament building, and communist hardliners have taken control of the Soviet government. This all sounds like the failed coup attempt from 1991 in our timeline, only even though the Soviet Union is in a much better place in the For All Mankind timeline, this version of the coup seems to be more successful. The next time we see Margo, she's brought into a frightening interrogation room with a great shot of the drain in the middle of the floor to add even more uneasiness as she's handcuffed to the table. We get to know a little more about her cover story. Margaret Reynolds, Canadian, business consultant. It's all kind of interesting since we didn't know how she was hiding out there, but her interrogator is only interested in one thing: the card with the telephone number that the mystery woman slipped her at the park. He explains that the number's prefix is assigned to the 3rd Directorate of the KGB, who he says is currently opposing constitutional transfer of government power to Korzhenko. 3rd Chief Directorate of the KGB is not a combination of words that clarifies much for me, but I will come back to this. What's important at the moment is how horrifying this must be for Margo. If she was really Margaret Reynolds, just trying to make an honest living in imports and exports, getting caught up at an illegal public demonstration against an orderly government transition, as he puts it, that would be scary enough. But she's under an assumed identity that was provided to her by a government that could very well have ceased to exist. What's more, he makes it plain that if he were to find out that she was there under false pretenses, then she could be charged with betrayal of motherland, which carries a sentence of 10 years in a labor camp or even death. Before they can get into her questioning, he hears gunshots and chaos outside and leaves. The next person who comes through the door is wearing a military uniform and introduces themselves as a colonel. He's got a very different tone and apologizes, telling her that the army is working to restore order and return Mr. Gorbachev to power. Then he brings the other interrogator back in, who is now noticeably roughed up, and asks him about the card. He breaks his finger to show him he's serious and then asks who answered when he called the number. It was a man who said it was a repair shop, so he mentioned Margaret Reynolds as a name, and the call was transferred. The next man said that she was one of their most valued customers, which gets the colonel's attention, and now he wants to know who gave her the card. He explains to the first guy that the number activates a trap line that redirects to the 2nd Directorate of the KGB. He wasn't just talking to the KGB, he was talking to the part of the KGB who watches the rest of the KGB. They're the ones that are backing Korzhenko, also known as the ones that are doing the coup, and the ones that he's opposed to. When he hears that the people on the phone didn't tell him who Margo was, he makes use of the drain in the middle of the floor by shooting the cop in the head. Then he strings Margo up by her wrists and continues to ask her about the woman who gave her the card. We know that she doesn't know who she is, and therefore can't tell him much, but then we also know that she has other secrets. He leaves her to hang there for a while and then returns to question her again, but this time, before he can get too far into it, there's another knock at the door, and someone who looks like they are of a higher rank calls him out. He comes back, cuts her down, and tells her goodbye, and then they cover her head with a sack and put her in the back of a truck. The hood is interesting because it creates a situation where she thinks she's on her way somewhere to get tortured at the very best, if not killed. That's certainly what she's thinking when they pull her out, but instead she's greeted by the woman who gave her the card. We learn that her name is Irina and that the coup was successful. Gorbachev and the army are ready to hand over power, and Korzhenko is the president. So the hardliners won, and Irina has been named the new head of Roscosmos, and she wants Margo to come work for her. After the day that she's had, Margo is a little dumbfounded, to say the least. She tells Irina, "You barely know me," and she fires back, "I've known you for a long time." While this is all going on, NASA tells Happy Valley they haven't heard from Roscosmos. Danny asks Svetlana if she's heard anything from Star City, which she hasn't, and she mentions it's not just them. Her father missed his regular message, and none of the other Soviet crew members are getting messages either. During their training exercise, Ed's hand starts to shake, to the point he's worried he'll make a mistake, so he passes it off as giving Svetlana a chance to try things out, drive the ship. She completes the docking without problems, but after the mission, he notices that she's having pain. She was injured during the Kronos mission, and nothing the doctor's giving her is helping. He tells her to come to his garden after hours, and it's kind of weird. When she asks why, he says, "Because I asked." Then she kind of gets starry-eyed and says, "How can I refuse?" When she gets there, she's impressed with his gardening. He talks about Kelly, and then he says that working in the garden makes him think about Karen. Not in a sad way, though. It makes him feel close to her, and Svetlana's father was a gardener, so it gives her a lot of good memories related to that. And then he shows her his secret garden. He is growing his own. He tells her he does it as a way to deal with his aches and pains, and that's where the Wayne reference comes in. He sent him the seeds and told him it might help with his situation. He smokes her up to help her with her pain, and then he does tell her about his condition, which the popular theory that's out there is that he has Parkinson's, and that does seem to be right. I mean, it makes sense at this point. When he shows her that his hands shake, she does take one of his hands and sort of massages it. And they certainly have a kindred spirit thing going on right now, but I imagine that this is going to turn into something more. Especially when I went back and watched the episode again, there really does seem to be a spark there, and I guess we'll see how that plays out. Elsewhere on the base, Miles gets a cute video message from his daughter, and then his wife follows up with a much less cute one. She got a job offer in Idaho and tells him, she's seen the deposit. What is he even doing up there if he can't make any real money? Sam, who got 0 vid mails last month, comes in to be his sounding board and reciprocates some by telling him she got divorced right before she came to Mars. And then it's off to the speakeasy to drown their sorrows. They ponder how much Ilya must make, and Miles decides to try to start working with him on the side. Ilya explains why he does what he does. He's been working for Helios for 15 years. He says they're greedy and they're cheats. And one day he just woke up and said, "You know what? I'm going to do this instead." And he's built this little black market business, and he says he's very careful. He turns down the idea of working with Miles at first, but then Sam comes over and tells him he has a green badge, which means he has accesses to places that Ilya can't go to, and he decides to give him a chance. We see them do this test run montage that lays out how he conducts his business. There's a look inside one of the crates, which he has someone at home fill the orders, fill up a container, and send it. Then he has someone on Mars on the inside who makes sure he gets it. There's a wide variety of stuff inside, nothing that looks too crazy. Personal items, a vibrator or two. He shows them the ropes. He gives them this idea of sviazi, which is making connections. And things seem to be going pretty good until he tries to show some initiative and fix his still. In the process of that, he ends up frying the thermostat, which it turns out will take months to get a new one up there and get the thing running again. But they do find out there's one in the North Korean area. Sam and Rich think he's crazy, but he does come up with a plan to get inside. He uses his HVAC access to make it look like they have elevated levels of methane. He gets inside, things are going well until he gets caught by Lee. But when he tells him why he needs the thermostat, Lee already knows about Ilya's operation and just wants an introduction. So he goes back to the speakeasy, he gets things fixed, and gets back on Ilya's good side. He brings Lee in, and Ilya tells him he can get anything he needs. And he comes up with a bizarre request. He pulls out a picture of him and his wife and says, "I need you to bring me my wife." And everyone just sort of looks at each other and stares in silence. To bring us back to the other bear hug, Dev makes his return lying alone on the beach. He has an argument with a surfer, and you get the sense that he lives a life of solitude, hiding behind his fences. Kelly and Aleida go out to pitch their project. For what it's worth, they look pretty good giving it, and it does seem like a worthwhile project, but they still get shut down everywhere by all the big players. No one wants to take the risk, but they think they know someone who might, and they decide to go see Dev. They pitch it to him, but he already knows about it. The crucial question for him is the potential return on his investment. Kelly brings up the science of it all, and he just turns them down. She almost makes her way out, but then she stops and feels compelled to tell him what she thinks of him. It's harsh, but it's all true. And he does a crazy thing. He turns it around and blames it on her mom stabbing him in the back, but adds that he's grateful because it opened his eyes. Now he really knows how people are. Later, when he's working out alone, he sees the proposal, and then he looks at the waves outside his window. And that makes you think back to what the surfer said about the universe sending you signs, sending you messages. Which is a great touch because of the setup, because of that previous conversation he had with the surfer. But then also you think about who this guy is and what you know about him from the last season. When they get back, they see that he got there before them. And he does apologize for what he said about Karen and tells Kelly what she said got him thinking. He talks about his father, how people let him down and how he gave up. He realizes now that he was going down the same path. And he still doesn't want to fund their project because rule number 1 in business is you never use your own money. But he does have a plan to stage a hostile takeover of Helios and use theirs. With his stock and the stock that Kelly inherited from Karen, if they can get enough shareholders to go in with them, they can pull it off. So they split up the list of stakeholders, and Aleida goes to see Bill. He's in a wheelchair, and based on their conversation about the smell of burning plastic, I assume that he was injured in the bombing. It's never said, but he was there that day, and he seemed pretty serious about never going back. They have the kind of exchange that has so much history rolled up in it that you gotta love it. She's finally able to say out loud what's going on with her, and why she can't go back to manned spaceflight. The whole thing really reframes her decision to leave, and I'm glad they figured out a way to have it happen through a conversation with Peanut, even if it feels like this might be the last time we see him. These two work together so well, they hit so many different things in this short conversation, and as I said, you just gotta love it. Later, Dev barges in to interrupt Richard Hilliard at a board meeting. He announces that he's taking over and lays things out. I'm not sure how realistic any of this is, but the way it's staged and how he carries it out seem to be what they're most concerned with. Going in, we were led to believe that their project had renewed his passion for exploration, and he was getting behind them to try to get back to that ideal of trying to make the world a better place. The confidence he displays when he's breaking down how Richard can't stop this seems appropriate. And the line about the lesson of Icarus not being don't fly too close to the sun, but make better wings, it sounds great. But as he continues to talk, it all starts to sound personal. And I like how they use Kelly and Aleida's reactions and how those change to make you wonder what is really motivating him here. They may still get their search for life out of this, but I seriously doubt that's Dev's main concern. This was a long episode and it was all over the place, and I guess that makes sense. We're reaching the point where the table is all but set and things can really take off. I don't think it's the best balanced episode they've ever had, but it's definitely not the worst. I really like the Margo stuff. Wrenn Schmidt's performance was perfect. It's so good that the fact that you really can't make sense of what's happening doesn't matter because you feel like you're in the same place her character is. It was kind of a roller coaster, but in the end it all makes sense. The second and third directorate of the KGB was confusing, and I didn't get why the army called the colonel off at first, but Irina cleared that all up. It will be great to see Margo go back to work. As much as I enjoyed this side story, I'll be happy to see her doing what she does best and seeing what that even looks like in the new political climate. The Cold War might be back on, and Irina has made plans, which might put Margo in some uncomfortable situations. As I mentioned, I don't trust Dev, at least not his motivations. Kelly brought her proposal, but she also reminded him of how many shares that she got from Karen when she showed up. And I do think last season he showed us who he is, and we shouldn't expect that he will change that much. The Miles stuff was a little bit of a surprise. I thought they were going to go down the road of organizing the workers, maybe a union, maybe a strike, shut down Happy Valley. They kind of went in the direction of crime, which it could be fun. I'm not really sure what to make of the character. He's kind of an idiot. He's likable and he has a sympathetic situation. But if he's going to go down this road, he almost has to get caught. I mean, it doesn't seem like a Kingpin origin story, so I'm curious to see where that goes. I was unsure on the first watch, but feel pretty confident feelings are going to be had between Ed and Svetlana. It's possible these could only go one way, but space is a lonely place and they're both adults, so I don't know. They are co-workers, so that could cause problems, but otherwise, bring it on. Him passing her the stick because he couldn't perform the maneuver is more troubling, considering he doesn't appear to have plans to retire gracefully. The way Bill got Aleida to open up and the way they work together is something I could watch every week, but I suppose it doesn't make sense for who they are as characters, and that's precisely why it works so well when you do get to see that. Last week I thought Aleida was running from her problems and that was going to come back and bite her, but now I'm not so sure, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.